Welcome to our video on Texas landlord-tenant laws. As a landlord, you need to know your responsibilities and rights to manage your rental well. To help you do that, here are some lease and landlord-tenant laws you need to know in the Lone Star State. The lease agreement is the foundation of the landlord-tenant relationship. It's a legally binding contract between a landlord and tenant that establishes the terms of the rental relationship. The most common type of lease agreement is a one-year, fixed-term lease that terminates at the end of the lease term. This is often referred to as a standard lease agreement.
In addition to the terms of the lease, Texas has some additional requirements and disclosures that must be included in the lease agreement. Texas landlords must provide tenants with the name and contact information of the person or entity on the deed, and the name and contact information of other authorized agents. Next is the special condition to cancel. Texas landlords must include specific language from the Texas Property Code stating that tenants have a right to end a lease early due to family violence, military deployment, or transfer. Texas lease agreements must also include language about a tenant's rights and remedies if repairs aren't completed within a reasonable time frame, usually 7 days. As of January 2022, Texas landlords are required to notify tenants of potential flood risks. This should be in writing and included in the lease agreement. Pursuant to federal law, if a property was built before 1978, tenants must be provided with a lead-based paint disclosure and pamphlet. Finally, Texas landlords of multi-unit properties must include a parking rules addendum or specific language in the lease, including the words parking rules in all caps, outlining parking and towing policies.
Next, let's talk about key landlord-tenant laws in Texas.
In Texas, there is no limit on the amount of the security deposit, as long as it's reasonable. Landlords must return any unused security deposit funds within 30 days of when the tenant vacates the rental property.
Texas does not provide specific guidelines about entering a property for non-emergency reasons, but we always recommend that landlords provide reasonable notice, which is usually 24 hours. Texas landlords may collect a late fee as long as late fee policies are stated in writing in the lease agreement. Late fees can only be incurred if rent is at least 2 days late, and all late fees must be reasonable. For properties with 4 or fewer units, a fee is considered reasonable if it's 12% or less of the monthly rent. For properties with 5 or more units, a fee is considered reasonable if it's 10% or less of the monthly rent amount. Texas landlords may require tenants to get renter's insurance. This is something landlords should always encourage tenants to do. If landlords are going to charge a fee for a returned payment, this fee must be clearly stated in the lease agreement. Returned payment fees should be reasonable and not exceed $30. Texas landlords need to be familiar with lease termination and renewal laws. Fixed-term leases terminate at the end of the term unless otherwise stated in the lease agreement. Month-to-month leases can be terminated by either party with 30 days notice. Texas law does not impose a limit on how much a landlord can increase the rent. However, the lease should specify the procedures and notice requirements for rent increases. Texas landlords must make a diligent effort to repair any problems that materially affect the physical health or safety of the tenant. Repairs should be made within a reasonable time frame, which is usually 7 days. Tenants in Texas have a right to quiet enjoyment of their rental unit. They also have a right to have any problems that materially affect their health or safety repaired. Tenants may seek to end the lease or withhold a portion of rent if a landlord violates these rights. If a tenant fails to pay rent or violates the lease agreement, the landlord may initiate the eviction process. The process must adhere strictly to Texas law, and the landlord cannot resort to self-help eviction methods, such as changing locks or shutting off utilities. Congratulations, you're now familiar with key lease laws and you're ready to create your Texas lease. While these laws might sound complicated, remember that our Texas lease automatically includes all required disclosures and gives you state assist tips throughout the lease building process. Before you turn over possession of your rental, Make sure you've screened all tenants, have an executed Texas lease agreement, and you've collected the entire security deposit and first month's rent. As you manage your rental, keep in mind that we have over 400 property management forms, including Texas state-specific forms. These cover every phase of the landlord lifecycle, from a Texas tenant screening disclosure to a Texas 3-day notice to vacate. Visit easylandlordforms.com to start your tenant screening. Create a Texas lease agreement that's guaranteed to comply with all Texas lease laws, and access Texas property management forms.